Good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. I am Dave Kluge, and I am joined with my good friend Troy King today, and also with Chalk from the Undroppables. Stoked that we could finally get on a show together. We've been talking a bunch behind the scenes. All of us are kind of making some waves in the industry, having some fun out here, but this is the first time we've all collaborated. So really, really excited to do this today. I mean, the one thing that I was thinking about this morning that's kind of crazy is we're already 30% of the way through the season. It's kind of unbelievable to think about. Chalk, how are your teams holding up so far, man? You doing all right?
I'm actually, from a redraft standpoint, I'm doing pretty well. Or, I mean, not from redraft. Redraft standpoint, I'm not doing well. Dynasty standpoint, I'm doing well. Holding up. Redraft, not too hot. Scott Fishbowl, I'm hanging in there. Sitting there at 2-3 now. Just right outside the top 200, but I'm doing okay, right? I mean, injuries aside, of course, we'll dive into all the disappointments and surprises. But I'm doing okay. I'm hanging in there. It's better than last year. I think for most people, last year was terrible.
Yeah.
So can't
Well,
complain.
I'd give yourself a little more credit. Top 200 in a 1900 person tournament. That's still,
Yeah.
almost top 10%. So give yourself a little bit of credit there. But before we dive into the show, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Obviously, you're over at the Undroppables. Everybody knows what the Undroppables are, but not a lot of people get to see the face behind the Undroppables. So why don't you let everyone know what you got going over there, what you guys are up to, and what they should expect from that crew?
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, I'm Chalk. I'm part of the Undroppables. We're a platform for content creators, specifically around football, fantasy football. Recently, we've been expanding, so kind of diving into what we've been doing and what we're going. I've been diving more into like football in general, not just from a fantasy perspective or DFS perspective, but football from like just from the game, looking at it from the game, looking at it from the pro level, from the college level. That feeds into Devi, right? And I think a lot of fantasy gamers, when we first start off, especially creating content, we're so consumed with creating content about fantasy points scored and things like that. But then when you start looking into like advanced analytics and people looking at film, right? You start looking at the way people analyze the game, whether it's film or numbers. You start realizing that they're analyzing the game of football, right? They're analyzing players, the way they play the game versus just stats on a stat sheet. 'Cause I think fantasy, when I first started, I got caught up with, I wouldn't be able to watch a lot of games. So, admittedly, as a beginner, I would chase box scores, right? So for us, we've been expanding out more into talking about the game of football. And then that again feeds into pick'ems, parlays, a lot of the new gaming that's coming out with fantasy related type games. So creating content around that. Been adding a lot of new members on the team, so that's been exciting. I think a lot of people you've kind of communicated with, kind of coming up in the industry now. A lot of new faces that we've kind of had a lot of like turnover, so to say, from when we started. I mean, no surprise. And I'm not going to hide anything. I think we've grown a lot in that regard. So continue to grow in that space. New staff and new faces, new content streams, and continue to provide a platform. Yeah, so I mean that's really what it is. And we're in the middle of the season, like you said, 30% in. I was just telling Tommy, like, we're gonna be looking in 2 weeks, like 50% through. Like, wow, like, can you believe it?
It's
So
wild to think about, man. It's flying by. And what I like about the Undroppables, and you kind of hinted at this a little bit, but you guys have content for everybody, whether it's Devi, college, fantasy, dynasty, sports wagering. If you want film, if you want analytics, there's a little bit of everything there. You've put together a really, really solid group of content creators. So respect the hustle and what you're doing over there. And then obviously up in the top right here, we got my co-host from the Football Guys Mailbag Show, longtime friend, Troy King. I think everyone knows where they could find you at this point, but TK, go ahead, let everyone know what you got going on over at Yahoo, over at Football Guys, where everyone can find you.
Of course. Well, yeah, y'all can find me at T King Mode on Twitter. I'm trying to get better at Instagram and TikTok. I'm still a novice there, but y'all can follow me there too. But yeah, so for Yahoo, I just started writing for them this season. It's been awesome. I've already learned so much. I have a takeaway article that comes out every Tuesday. So there's one actually out today. So check it out. I talk about Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase, Miles Gaskin. So check it out, my takeaways article, as well as I contribute to a bold predictions article every single week for Yahoo. So check out those. And like Dave said, I'm one of the co-hosts of the Mailbag Show for Football Guys. So definitely send us your questions. We're here to help. We get some things wrong. I admit, look, I'm wrong sometimes, and it's okay. Like, I admit it, but when I'm right, I'm right too, right? So it is a mix of both. You can't always be right, but we try to help out as best as possible. But yeah, and also, I write articles for Football Guys as well. So yeah, check us out and check me out, and I appreciate everybody, supporting, rocking with me.
Of course. And yeah, I think, like you said, we get some right, we get some wrong. Last week, I think we told quite a few people to bench Myles Gaskin.
Of course, yeah.
Probably not the best move, but hey, it happens.
Yo, the Miami Dolphins have some explaining to do. That made absolutely no sense for he literally had 2 carries, 0 targets the week before, and then he set a career high in receptions. He actually led all running backs in receptions this upcoming week after having 0 targets last week. It made absolutely no sense. I'm a Dolphins fan, by the way, for those who don't know, so absolutely frustrating. So
yeah, we were all drafting we were drafting Myles Gaskin in the offseason, hoping that he was going to get that workhorse role, and now he's just a pass catching back. Chalk him up to that J.D. McKissick, Nyheim Hines role. That's kind of where he's at in Miami. So if you can guess the game scripts, he'll still have some big weeks coming up, but. Anyway, we got a lot to get into today, some things that we want to talk about, but I think the first thing that we need to talk about is what is going on with Jon Gruden right now. That was a huge story yesterday, came out yesterday during Monday Night Football, and it's something that we need to address. Now, I'm just going to call it like it is. I am the only white male on this show right now. I think that this is an opportunity where it's very important for me to listen. So obviously what he said was wrong, and he is serving the consequences of his actions, which I believe that he should. Now, being completely honest, I've been ignorant to some of these issues in the past, and I've been able to grow and change a lot by listening to my friends and peers. And that's what I want to talk about today. So, Troy, start us off here. How do you feel about the emails that came to light over the last week, and how are you feeling about Jon Gruden right now?
Man, I feel like I could talk about this for an hour, but I'm not going to. So, I'll start by saying that obviously there were disrespectful, insensitive, inexcusable, everything he said. But shout out to my guy Ray GQ, who said this all on Twitter as well as on this show this morning. He said it so eloquently, but it's a matter of first, the racist comments came out, and it was a scenario where he did his press conference. He didn't seem extremely remorseful, and it didn't seem like he was going to get fired based off of that first, leaked information that came out. But then obviously that was wrong, and then the misogyny, the homophobia, all of that came out as well. He literally just said everything you weren't supposed to say. And the problem is, on top of just all that, hatred and disgustingness that came from the emails, he's just being an idiot because he sent all these through his work email. So like, I don't even know. Like, I just don't understand what was going on and what his rationale was. He either didn't care, or he was just being dumb, or a combination of both. Right? That's what it boils down to.
I think what you hit on too is the lack of remorse in that press conference, where he was just kind of, it looked like he was reading something that a robot had spit out and told him to talk about. And, we're human. Everybody makes mistakes, but I think learning and growing from those mistakes is a very important process. And I didn't get that from Gruden at all. I got somebody who had no remorse whatsoever, didn't really care about what he said, and just wanted to go through the motions. So Chalk, I see you nodding your head here as well, and I'd like to get your take on this. How are you feeling about the Gruden situation right now?
Super disappointed from many levels, right? From a fan of the game, just kind of from a fan of the game, disappointed. Fan of Jon Gruden, I'm a Bucks fan, disappointed, and we can get into all that. But most importantly, looking at it from a person in power, right? Using again. Communication means through the institution, right? Like it just reeks of that institutionalized power, right? Whether he didn't care or just maybe he just thinks he's above and beyond anything. I can just use my email and use my stuff the way I want to and live without consequence. It's just a lack of accountability. That's when I was nodding my head a lot when Troy was talking about the accountability aspect, just lack of remorse. When it first came out too, right? It's the first stuff that he comments about Smith, I mean, abhorrent, right? Like, what the fuck are you doing? Excuse me, like, what are you doing? What are you talking about? And then he's just kind of like trying to downplay it, like, oh yeah, I'm talking about loose lips or this and that. It's like, okay, come on, like that makes no sense. First of all, so then you're like not taking accountability. I feel like the fact of a lack of remorse there and then a lack of action taken, it was disappointing, right, on all levels, right, from him and then the team, the NFL, whatever it was, just the lack of action. It takes more to come out, right? The misogyny, the homophobia, all that other stuff to come out, which is also terrible and unacceptable. But like it needs that too, right? Like couldn't it have just the racist comments alone been enough, right? So like where do you draw the line, right? It's now he's said 2 or 3 things, so now he's offended more classes of people. So now let's take action. So that was a little question mark from my part. Just okay, where's the line? Like shouldn't have action been taken more swiftly? And then another kind of lesson for me, and it just kind of speaks to so many lessons we've seen in sports and history, where it doesn't matter how successful you are, and this is why I love guys like you, Dave, and Troy. It doesn't matter how successful you are. It doesn't matter what moves you're making. It doesn't matter where you get to, what pinnacle you reach, and for how long. If you're doing things wrong to get there, or you do things wrong on the way there, most likely it'll come to light at some point, whether it's during that rise, during the time you're reigning, or even after, like people are just kind of in awe of you, right? After you've retired from your career, it all comes out, right? Roger Clemens, this. I mean, you can name so many people who've been at the top, right? And then we lose respect. So just a bummer, right? And yeah, sorry for going off, but yeah, just a bummer for someone like Gruden, who I respected. I had a lot of held in high regard and just all that. So it erases everything, right? Like I didn't know you, and yeah, just disappointed.
I'm with you. And first of all, I want to say don't apologize for talking, because this is what we should be doing for people like myself. I mean, let's call it like it is. The majority of the people in the fantasy football space look a lot like me, and people that are in my situation and have been just living with this privilege really struggle to understand. So getting to hear the voices from you and Troy is extremely important. And I just want to thank both of you for being open and candid. We can move on to the next subject, but if there's anything else that you guys want to add on this John Gruden situation, now's the time. And if there's anything else you want to say.
I think I'm good. I mean, look, Chop, he said it really well. For me, again, I feel like we could talk about this for so long, but I think we addressed the main points. So I think we're good to continue.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next subject, which is another head coach that is kind of in some hot water, but not quite for the same reasons as John Gruden. We got Urban Meyer out here, who, a lot of people were expecting him to be the first coach gone, and he found himself in, a pretty big bit of trouble last week. Obviously, what he did was even comparing it, talking about it in the same light as John Gruden doesn't even feel right, because it's totally different. But he has kind of lost the respect of his team and his fan base and so many people in the NFL community. So what do you think is going to happen going forward with Urban Meyer? Chalk, why don't you start us off here? Does he have any way to regain the locker room, or do you think his time in Jacksonville is done?
No, I think it's done, right? 0-5. That right on the heels of it, like right before that, now you're 0-5 and you have that hanging over the locker room. People are laughing at you. The team's laughing at you. It would take an enormous miracle, a turn of events, for that to happen. I don't see that happening.
Now, what do you think, Troy? And there's one other coach I want to talk about after this, but do you think that Urban Meyer has a way to still salvage what's happening in Jacksonville, or do you think that he's already got one foot out the door there?
Absolutely not. He's gone, and and I feel like this was more as like the icing of the cake, right? He's been doing questionable things since he's gotten there, with the hiring of that the coach that said racist things, to just the way he handles things. He
Bringing
just
in
doesn't seem like he
Tebow
knows
as a
what he's
tight
doing.
end.
Yeah, Tebow, the tight end, publicly mentioning how he's disappointed he didn't get Kadarius Toney, like just things that you're not supposed to do, and it just seems very amateurish. And then he was just kind of just a joke for a while, and now this obviously what happened was extremely inappropriate, and everyone knows what happened by now. But I just don't. What's the point? Again, like you're 0-5. He has. It's not like he's undefeated and all this stuff has happened. Like unfortunately, sometimes wins mask some of the other things that go on in life. But unfortunately now it's like, okay, you've done all this and you're losing. You're clearly not going to be back next year, right? It's kind of a matter of time, right? I think that was the countdown of when is he going to get fired, because I don't believe many people are expecting him to get a second chance, because he hasn't done anything to really prove that he deserves one, in terms of, again, You're you're winless. You're absolutely winless. Okay, so that's all I'll say on it.
So speaking of winless teams, there's one other coach I want to talk about before we talk about last night's unbelievable game in Baltimore. But the other coach I want to talk about is Dan Campbell, because he's in the same boat as Urban Meyer from a winless 0-5 standpoint. But when you look at the respect that the media has for him and his teammates have for him, it just seems like they are worlds apart. So Chalk, talk a little bit about that. Let's say that you are the head coach of an 0-5 team. How is Dan Campbell still able to get the respect of fans, teammates, and the media when they are unable to win games?
I mean, I think it's that team first mentality. I mean, I'm sure Dan Campbell, the leader, he's the first one in, last one out, right? As the coach and leader of the team, game planning. So the team is entrusting Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell speaks in a lot of hyperbole, and he's the type of coach that tries to get this team to run through a wall type thing, which is great, and maybe that resonates well with his team. So they're going to play their hearts out for him, right? And that resonates well with the media, right? Seeing a team playing hard, at least for the coach and for the fan base. And then that obviously, energizes the fan base as well. The team has promised, right? I mean, I think the fan base and the media kind of knew too with the Lions, kind of expected not too much from that team. I mean, even with Jacksonville, I mean, yeah, the team's not great, but you had Trevor Lawrence coming in. I think there was a lot of hype around that. Not as much hype in Detroit. But yeah, I think the way Dan Campbell kind of hard hat right to work versus Urban Meyer, who's in the headlines for getting grinded on, cheating on his wife, versus Dan Campbell's making headlines for getting his guys to run through walls, right? So
Yeah.
a little bit different.
And I think the two microcosms that kind of sum up those two players, you got Urban Meyer, who's making headlines because he won't fly back with his team after a tough loss. And then you've got Dan Campbell up on the podium, crying his eyes out, spilling his guts out, and just showing support and love for his team. And that's something that, I mean, if I was playing for the Detroit Lions, I'd want to run through a wall for Dan Campbell. How does that man not get you hyped up? But anyway, let's go ahead and switch to last night's game, because I mean, we have just been blessed this year. When it comes to primetime football games, I mean, I think we've only had like one or two games that hasn't been down to the wire. And last night's game, I was ready to turn it off in the third quarter. And I said, no, let me see what Lamar Jackson can pull out of his bag of tricks. And that's exactly what he did yesterday. After that crazy performance where he threw for over 400 yards, had over 40 completions, was rushing the ball. He had a couple tough fumbles, but realistically, I mean, that was the best we've ever seen Lamar Jackson play in football. Now, he's ranked, I had him ranked as my QB1 heading into the season, and right now he's the QB3 overall, just less than half a point a game behind Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes. So, Troy, let me ask you first, how high are you ranking Lamar Jackson in the rest of your season rankings?
So going into the season, I had him as number 2. I would say right now, I'm probably going to keep him there. I'll keep him there right now, just because again, what Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes, they speak for themselves with their play, right? Lamar had a phenomenal game, and look, 2 is fair, right? I think 2 is fair. It's funny because last night I actually turned the game off. I was going to sleep. I was about to go to sleep, and then people were blowing up my phone after like the first Mark Andrews touchdown. My phone was going off. I'm like, all right, I turned the game back on. I got to see the rest of it, but man, look, Lamar Jackson, and it's funny. I actually mentioned this. Like, I commented to someone on Twitter where it's like when Lamar Jackson has a really good game, it seems like everybody's his fan, but when he has a terrible game, everyone says he can't throw. Like, I feel like, I don't know, some people are wishy-washy, but I'm just glad he had a great game, and hopefully, look, again, I want to see him in the Super Bowl, so I'm crossing my fingers for that.
Yeah, I mean, they were my Super Bowl pick. I put some money on them before the season started, so I love the way that this team is clicking right now. It's a blast to see. Chalk, I want to get your Lamar Jackson ranking for the rest of the season, but before that, I also want to talk a little bit about Marquis Brown. This man has been balling out. It seems like people haven't even really realized yet that in his last 11 regular season games, he has 11 touchdowns. Right now, he's sitting as the wide receiver 6 in PPR leagues. So I want to get your rest of the season ranking on Lamar Jackson, but I also want to know how you're feeling about Marquis Brown. Are you ranking this guy as a wide receiver 1 yet?
No, not yet. Man, that pains me to know that Marquise Brown is doing it. I cut bait on him after week 1 in a redraft league. It was like five spot bench, was tight, and I have Lamar Jackson in that league, so it actually hurts a lot. I don't see him as a wide receiver 1 rest of the season. Going forward, I can see him as a wide receiver 2, top 20, top 24 play. Someone you could at least comfortably play in your flex, right? In your kind of normal redraft leagues, especially PPR formats. Lamar Jackson, I do have him as my quarterback four, my QB4 rest of the season. And that was before the game, so I haven't changed it. I don't think I'm going to waiver. I think I had him about right. I think I was fairly high on it going into the season. I had him like around the top five quarterbacks going into the season this year. Him and Tom Brady, I was kind of going back and forth. When there were some injuries in that Ravens backfield, I did bump up Lamar Jackson a little bit more. So I do like him rest of the season. I think he looks great. And like you said, yeah, depends on what kind of game he has. He's either great or he can't throw or he can throw. Like, what is it, right? He can't throw, but he just had 40 completions, like you said, and 400 yards. So I'm not sure what it is.
And man, it's just like you don't get any fantasy points for this, but I don't know if there's a more fun player to watch in the NFL. Like his running is so effortless. Even when he throws the ball, like he just flicks his wrist and that ball explodes out of his hand and flies 40 yards down the field. He is, just a menace out on the football field and a ton of fun to watch. The last talking point, though, that I want to talk about from this game is the tight end situation. I mean, we've seen how players can ball out in a primetime game and then their value just skyrockets in fantasy football. And right now, looking at the tight end landscape, TJ Hawkinson and Darren Waller, they've both been a little bit disappointing over the last few weeks. George Kittle's on IR now. And then you've got guys like Dalton Schultz and Dawson Knox just popping up out of nowhere. So, Troy, if I'm doing my tight end rankings for the rest of the season, is it crazy to put Mark Andrews as the tight end 2 behind Travis Kelce?
It's not crazy, but I'm not doing it. That's Darren Waller's spot. Okay, it's reserved for Darren Waller, right? So yes, and unfortunately, the problem is we were teased by game one where he had like 1 million yards, a million catches. He had like 20 targets. 19 targets, right? So the problem is like when you have those high expectations, and then he's been okay. He has been terrible, but for Darren Waller, he hasn't been Darren Waller, but. He's still my tight end 2. I love what Mark Andrews did. He obviously had a phenomenal performance, but he's firmly in my tight end 3 spot, though. I will say that. It could change. Maybe if he keeps doing if he has more games similar to yesterday, then maybe he'll overtake Waller, but I'm not ready to do that yet.
Yeah, I think with George Kittle getting bumped down a little bit due to his spot on IR, I think that it's very reasonable to put Mark Andrews up there as your tight end 2, tight end 3 for the rest of the season. Chalk, where do you have him right now? Are you moving him up, or is he still kind of in that 4 to 5 range for you?
Yeah, I have him at 4 rest of the season. I'm tempted to move him past Hawk. Right, I have Hawk at 3. Hawk hasn't been great, right? I think the expectations were high.
Is that Pitts at 2 then?
No, it's Waller. So I will have Waller at 2 still.
Yeah.
It's still Waller. Pitts, I'm probably moving closer to 5, right? And I had Fan at 5 as kind of default. I wasn't happy about who was at 5. I think Pitts is getting there. Mm-hmm. It's funny because Dynasty, you have to be a lot less reactive per game. But rest of the season and redraft, you want to be a little bit more reactive. So it's like, you're playing that recency bias game, like, I don't want to be, too biased by the last game out, but is that indicator of the next couple of games because that's important, right? So I have Andrews right there at 4, probably creeping into 3. Like Troy said, I can't see him overtaking 2 unless we see Andrews continue to have not these type of games, but really strong performances, and then Waller kind of continuing to decline, right? And that's an asterisk. Like decline doesn't mean Waller's not good, right? Waller's he's elite. Declining is not putting up 20 points a game, right? Maybe he's putting up 16. So just something to think about.
Yeah, and I think that when it comes to like a pure talent standpoint, Mark Andrews is one of the best tight ends in the league. I mean, he's sure-handed. He's get the yards after the catch, and for him, it's just the pass volume on that offense is really what's holding him back. So now that we're seeing Lamar starting to throw a little bit more, we're seeing Marquis Brown put up valuable numbers. We're seeing Mark Andrews do the same. So, we might have to kind of shift the way that we're looking at this Baltimore Ravens offense. Last night was the first time in years that they haven't rushed for 100 yards. And when you're rolling out Latavius Murray and Devonta Freeman and Tyson Williams, they don't really have that guy like you've had in previous years where it was J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and Mark Ingram. So this team might have to start leaning on Lamar's arm a little bit more than they have in the past. So it might be time to change our frame of thought when it comes to how we evaluate this Baltimore Ravens team. But, we talked about where we're ranking the guys on this team, but I just kind of want to talk a little bit about some of our overall projections and rankings that we did in the offseason, see how they are holding up. I'll call it out right now. I've had some big hits. Debo Samuel, Cooper Kupp, Mike Williams, Jamar Chase, Deontay Johnson, and Antonio Brown were guys that I absolutely crushed it with, but I also had some big misses. My boy Chris Carson isn't looking too hot right now, dealing with a neck injury, hasn't really been productive in the games that he did play. George Kittle, people were fading him for injury concerns. I said, screw that. I'm drafting George Kittle anywhere. Sure enough, he's on IR after a few weeks. And then DK Metcalf, I thought that Tyler Lockett was going to remain atop that pecking order, but DK Metcalf is just balling out, catching a touchdown almost every single week. So I'll get into the numbers, how I'm doing in the accuracy contest. But Chalk, I know you're in that accuracy contest as well. So how are you holding up? How are you feeling about your rankings now through the first third of the season?
It's getting better. First week I was bad. I was like towards the very bottom. And since then, since week one, I've been improving each week. I'm nearing the top 50 just on a weekly basis. Overall season to date hasn't come out after this past week.
Tonight.
Tonight. So I'm creeping. I'm nearing that top 100 now for the season. Been consistently in the top 100 over the last month or so now. So I'm dialing it in. I'm talking to some friends. Shout out David Zach out there and some of my buddies. He's crushing. So I'm picking people's brains and trying to tune my process. Trying to get up into that top 100 on a consistent basis. I had some tough breaks to start off the year. I mean, I think some of my nicer hits, the hits I'm proud of, like Zeke Elliott, I was really confident that he was going to come back strong. I kind of put some money down on him. So great to see him doing well. I missed on Robert Woods. Cooper Kupp versus Wood debate. That was something I missed big time, and I do admit, that was someone that I thought was going to do really well. Let's see, Terry McLaurin. I was very high on him, so I think that was one of my hits as well. So Terry McLaurin, one of my bigger hits, I think, and Zeke. I'd probably put my hats on.
I like that. I actually had a tweet from a few months ago where I said I was ranking Cooper Kupp ahead of Robert Woods, and I'll send it to you guys when we're done with the show if you want to read through some funny replies, because this is months before the season started, and everybody was so sure, and this was a tweet that got some decent traction. So there's a few hundred replies in there, and just combing through the replies and looking at how and there's still a lot of season left. I mean, Robert Woods looked great last week. I think that we know that Cooper Kupp has this kind of special rapport right now with Matt Stafford, but Robert Woods did step up in week 5, and there's a lot of season left. So I don't think that you can completely write that one off just yet. But Troy, let's get a couple of your hits and misses. How are you doing so far this season?
Sure. So I was like, Robert Woods, Chuck mentioned it, man. Look, thank God he had this. Look, the squeaky wheel. He got his target. So hopefully, look, I just want them to be even, right? I want one of them just getting everything. Hey, just spread it out, Matthew Stafford. Just spread it out. But I'll say Gaskin is somebody. It's weird. I kind of missed on him for most of the season. Then he had a big season. I thought he could be an RB1. One of my biggest hits was Leonard Fournette. So Leonard Fournette, yep. I tweeted about like, hey, why does everybody hate Leonard Fournette so much after his playoff run and his Super Bowl run? But people are like, nah, Rojo, or Leonard Fournette's no good, and he's in the best passing offense, and yet he's the workhorse. Rojo is only playing like 19% of snaps or whatever on the season. He's barely getting any work. And we know that Gio Bernard is the third down back. So it's rare that you get, and remember in best ball, I kept getting him like in the 10th round because nobody wanted him. So I'm only in 16 like teams and on underdog, but I had having like 50% because I'm like, I believe in this guy. That was probably one of my biggest hits. Marquis Brown. I've always been a huge Marquis Brown fan, but I'm like, I want zero to do with him, especially because Rashad Bateman. I'm like, I'm a huge Rashad Bateman fan, and then look, now he's making me look bad. And I would say that besides that, I mean, I knew DJ Moore was going to be good. I didn't know he was going to be this good. So I would say that maybe that's another miss for me. But I mean, Zeke's somebody that I was on the train. Me and Dave, I remember during his offseason, we kept talking about, yo, we're on the Zeke train. And people hated him. So, Chalk, we're right there with you. But I'll say those are probably some of the guys that I missed on and some people I hit on.
And I think one of the really fun things about being plugged in 365 days a year like we are is seeing how those ADPs change. Because when you hear us saying like, all of us were big supporters of Zeke and everyone's like, well, yeah, duh, he was a top 5 pick. But go back to May, go back to June. Zeke was falling way out of the first round. People wanted nothing to do with Zeke. I think the
and
reason that he
Swift.
moved
Sorry,
up is,
Swift.
yeah, Swift
Maybe
was
fell
another
to the
one.
5th round. Oh my God. That's
Yeah, I mean,
ridiculous.
Joe Mixon. I was getting Joe Mixon in the 3rd, 4th round in best ball leagues, in February and March. So watching how that ADP shapes over time is a lot of fun. That's probably been, my favorite part of being in the fantasy football industry is watching that change. One guy, for instance, was Antonio Brown. When, in February, I was drafting Antonio Brown in the 110, 115 range consistently. And then he started to creep up. And by the time everyone else was drafting, then he was going in the 60s. But there was a time where you can get Antonio Brown outside of the top 110. But talking about accountability and checking in on everything, I'll go through my rankings right now. If anybody out here can help me with my quarterback rankings, that's where I need desperate help with. We got 200 people in this accuracy contest. I am 173rd when it comes to QBs, and that is dragging down my overall score. I'm killing it with running backs. I'm in the top 30 percentile there, killing it with wide receivers. I'm in the top 15 percentile, but quarterbacks right now are just absolutely killing me and dragging me down. So if anyone's got advice on how to rate quarterbacks weekly, hit up your boy, because I could really, really use it this year. But enough talking about the offseason, what we did there. Let's talk about this rookie class, because, we got spoiled last year with some phenomenal rookies, and everyone was saying, yeah, that's an outlier. Don't expect it again. But looking at some of the rookies that we got this year, it's a lot of fun. First guy I want to talk about is Ja'Marr Chase. So, Chalk, what should we expect here? I mean, this dude is balling out. He's got, in his last 17 games, he's caught 14 touchdowns in his 14 games with a touchdown in his last 17 games with Joe Burrow, totaling 23 touchdowns. That is just a mind-blowing number, and that has translated to his NFL success. So is he a guy, I know you're not with Marquis Brown, but is Ja'Marr Chase a guy that you're ready to put into your wide receiver 1 redraft rankings?
Oh, no.
No.
It's tempting, but no. I love Ja'Marr Chase though, man. Like oozing with talent, man. Like we knew, right? Like all of us knew, right? He was gonna be great. Just checked all the boxes coming in. Question mark, oh, he didn't play that like last year, this and that. Like, come on, man. Talent doesn't disappear after a year. I mean, if anything, he's just resting, getting better. Man, it's great. I've been trying to sneak him on more dynasty teams lately. Just whatever I can do. I mean, I have him in my top 5. I mean, I've been sending out offers like just AJ Brown for Chase. Like I want Chase. Like I love AJ Brown. I felt so dirty doing it and so wrong, but I'll make that swap right now. Like give me some extra years, and Chase looks so good.
Yep.
But not a wide receiver 1 in redraft. Not yet.
And Troy and I, we just had this conversation pretty recently where we were talking about all these young wide receivers, and it's splitting hairs once you start looking at Ja'Marr Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, DK Metcalf, AJ Brown. I mean, all of these guys are so freaking good that when you're looking at the top echelon of players, I think at that point it just kind of becomes a preference. Like who do you like? Because you really can't say that one is better than the other. But Troy, how are you feeling about him in redraft? Do you think Ja'Marr Chase can put up wide receiver 1 numbers through the end of his rookie season?
I think he can. I definitely think he can, which was surprising because if you asked me at the beginning of the season, I wouldn't have said that. I'm like, guys, he's a rookie. But what he's doing, it's hard to ignore.
We thought T. Higgins was going to cut into his target share.
I thought it was too. And what's crazy is what's most surprising is that he's just been so efficient, because the Bengals last year, the Bengals were like towards the top of the league in terms of like passing attempts, right? And then this year, they're not even passing the ball that much. But for some reason, Chase keeps scoring touchdowns. And, there's some games where he gets a lot of targets. Some games he gets a decent amount of targets, but no matter what. And also his ADOT is through the roof. All of his targets are down the field. So he's scoring touchdowns. He's always getting targeted down the field. It's everything you want for fantasy, right? So I just don't see it slowing down anytime soon. And again, it's funny because some of the critique on him is that he can't separate. He's been doing a good job separating from what I've seen, all season. So I think that his ceiling, if he finished in the top 5 by the end of this year, I don't think anyone would be surprised. Just if he keeps up this particular pace. I'm wondering what defenses are going to do, right? Like, look, you see this man scoring touchdowns every week. You should probably do something to stop it. But yeah, I'm very optimistic on him. Again, like I like Chase. I wasn't like one of those people that thought he was generational. I thought he was just a really good, wide receiver. Look, the way he's been doing, I don't know. I might have to change my mind on that. We'll see. But now he's phenomenal.
Well, I want to throw one more stat out there, and I dug this one up yesterday, and it blew my mind. Since 1980, there are only 2 wide receivers that have more yards in their first 5 games than Jamar Chase has so far, and that's Randy Moss and Anquan Bolden. So Jamar Chase is off to a historic start for his season, and the term generational gets thrown around pretty loosely out in these parts, but when you're in a class that is just Anquan Bolden and Randy Moss, you might be a little deserving of that title. But let's talk about another guy who I don't think is anywhere near generational, but he is seeing a ton of volume. Najee Harris on the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think right now it seems like people are kind of torn. He's putting up fantasy numbers, but he hasn't been extremely efficient with the numbers. So, Chalk, it's way too early to write this guy off as a bust or a breakout player. But which way do you think that he is trending? Do you think that he's going to be a solid asset for years to come, or do you think he's somebody that might only have a couple of years in the tank before getting replaced?
I think he's going to have his rookie contract. So I think he's going to have, 4 years? Was he a first? He wasn't a first round pick, right? So it's 4 years.
He was the
first
overall. So he'll have the 5th year tender if
fifth,
they choose.
Fifth year tender. Yeah. So he'll have 5 years. And I think he'll be running back 1 candidate. Right there every year for that first contract. I think because the usage, the line should get better. I don't know. I know he's getting a lot of points through the targets and through that, but I'm not sold on him in terms of he's such a good player, right? He's Christian McCaffrey, he's Derrick Henry, I don't see that, right? I don't see DeAndre Swift in him. I think he's good, and I think he's in the right situation to be used properly to his skill set. So I think he'll be good for 4 years, and I wouldn't be surprised if they bring in maybe someone to spell him a little bit, but knowing the way they play out there, they do run primarily one back. So
yeah. Now, one thing that I did pull up, and this is, I was going through a ton of historical data yesterday, just looking at, the first 5 games of a bunch of rookies. And since 2000, there are only 2 first-round rookies that have seen the volume that Najee Harris has had and have had a worse yard per carry. And the only 2 guys that have seen fewer yards per carry were Trent Richardson and Doug Martin. So those are 2 guys that flamed out pretty quickly. And like I said, it's a very small sample size. Don't want to jump to conclusions. But if I'm being honest, I mean, he had that one play where he stiff-armed a guy into the dirt. Outside of that, Najee Harris really hasn't done too much to impress me so far. He's a guy that's getting a lot of points through the air, and he's living up to his fantasy football value. But I'm a little bit concerned about him. Troy, how are you feeling about Najee?
So I do want to defend Najee in terms of the yards per carry, right? So to me, yards per carry is a combination of not just a running back stat, but an offensive line stat. The offensive line is absolute garbage. So to me, that's one of the reasons why his yards per carry is so low, right? Because the offense, he has to do so much. And that's the problem. It's I feel like everything that he has to do is a struggle because the offensive line is so terrible. But he looks really good as a receiver. I'm with you guys. He's not Swift. He's not one of these, Barkley. He's nothing. He's not in that conversation. From what we've seen, right? He's a good pass catcher. I feel like he's good at everything, but in terms of great, that's the problem. He's just not great. He's not in that upper echelon, but he's really good and he's getting the volume and he's in the perfect offensive system for fantasy, like we guys talked about, right? Tomlin likes his workhorse running back, and to me, that's appealing, right? Sometimes he's talented and he has the opportunity. He's just not as talented as some of the other guys. So I'm confident in him. I want him on my teams, and I think that he's going to be, like you guys said, he's going to be that running back for quite some time, right? As long as he holds up. I'm assuming that they're going to eventually address their offensive line. What's crazy is a few years ago, they had the best offensive line in the league. Now it's trash. So, and for dynasty purposes, I'm going to assume that that line's going to be better, which means Najee is going to be better. But I still like him for fantasy. It's just, has he been wow? No, he hasn't been wow. But look, you getting that volume, I want you on my fantasy team.
And yeah, volume is king in redraft, absolutely. So I think that you're, at least getting a locked and loaded running back 1 for the remainder of the season. But There's another rookie I want to talk about, and this guy just blew me away last week. Probably the most disrespected first-round pick we have ever seen in fantasy football history. Kadarius Toney was just getting clowned by the fantasy football community, and I mean, there's so many reasons why. It could be because the Giants took him, and everyone's kind of clowning the Giants. It could be because he got some praise from Urban Meyer. It could be the late breakout age. There's so many reasons that people didn't like Kadarius Toney, but I mean, I hate to make this comp, but he kind of looked like Odell Beckham out there last week, just balling out, elite timeshare, getting yards or catches down the field, taking little screens and ripping through the defense. He did it all this week. So, Chalk, how are we supposed to deal with Kadarius Toney now in dynasty leagues? Is he just shot up everybody's rankings?
He probably is. I'm the wrong person to ask. Like I was one of those that were dancing on his grave before he even played an NFL down. So
Hey,
shame
everybody
on
was, and don't feel bad
shame
about
on
that.
me.
Everybody was, man.
Shame on me. So definitely miss. Kick can play. I mean, you should, right? I mean, you put up that many yards in a game, you could play. Um, at the same time, we've seen other young players, other players do things like this before, right? So is it a flash in the pan? Is it the real deal? I don't know. So yeah, again, from dynasty perspective, I try not to knee jerk too much off a game. Although this is a couple of, I think he's showing a little bit more now, right? This was the real breakout. Um, I'll start moving them up. I'm not going to shoot them up. I tend not to do that. Whether it's a Tony or a Cordero Patterson, I don't shoot these guys up dynasty rankings. But he'll move. I'm going to stay away right now personally. If I miss the train on this one, I do. I'll take the L. But yeah, I'm happy for the Giants fans, and I'm happy for him. But yeah, I'm gonna kind of hold for now. hold
Yeah.
hold off.
Yeah, you got to have some faith in your process, and your process is
Yeah.
rock solid. So props to you for standing by it. Troy, what do you have to add to the Kadarius Toney? Because then after that, there's one more guy that I want to talk about in this rookie class.
It's funny. I actually just found a tweet. I'm gonna share it in a little bit. But so with Tony, I wasn't down on Tony. I really liked Tony coming into it. But the problem was I was just very confused by I want to say I was swayed by the fantasy community, but I was so shocked. I was wondering, was I missing something? Because everybody hated him. In terms of rookie drafts, they're like, oh my God. So he was going in like the third, fourth round. I'm like, am I missing something? I like this guy. But I started worrying. And then one thing I was worried about was that he wasn't seeing any playing time. He wasn't getting in preseason. Like the Giants he wasn't getting on the field. So I'm like, I wasn't calling him a bust, but I'm like, okay, what's going on? Clearly, like maybe I was wrong on something. So I wasn't clowning him, but clearly, and the issue is it's a combination of yes, we know that he's good, but are the Giants going to do the smart thing? Because he only saw the playing time because every other wide receiver is injured. So if everyone gets healthy, is he going to get those opportunities? We don't know, right? If the Giants are smart, you spend a first round pick on him, he's looked good, you probably should use him more. But I'm not confident in terms of the coaching staff or the offensive coordinator if they're going to feature him. They clearly should, but that's my only hesitation is that he's performing because everybody else is hurt. But again, I have him, I think, on like 30% of my best ball leagues. So I was happy about it. So yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic on him.
Yeah, I got clowned for sharing one of my best ball rosters. I got clowned for taking Kadarius Toney in the 18th round. Like of everything that was going on in my best ball draft, all people wanted to do was ask why the heck I took Toney in the 18th round. And it was a dart throw, but it definitely worked out in some leagues. But the last rookie I want to talk about is a guy that I know all three of us have talked about this guy before publicly, and that is Rondale Moore. And I think all of us are just in love with the talent of Rondale Moore. But his situation in Arizona right now is a little bit tough. He's third or fourth in pecking order behind AJ Green, DeAndre Hopkins, and he's kind of there with Christian Kirk, which is frustrating to see. So, Chalk, why don't you start us off with here? Can Rondale Moore have success as a rookie, or is he a guy that you just want to go out and acquire as much of possible now for when AJ Green and DeAndre Hopkins eventually hit that age hump?
Yeah, I want all the Rondale Moore. I think he'll still kind of have some splashes throughout this year, right? They'll keep spiking up his value when it happens. But yeah, I want all the Rondale Moore. So it's so fun to watch. and then paired with Kyler, right? So it's just fantasy points, right? I have a lot of Kyler on a lot of my dynasty teams, and yeah, just why not, right? I mean, it's fun to root for players that are fun to watch, right? Like when you're watching ESPN, the guys are popping off the screen. Like that's what you really care about, right? It's cool to see your points going up, but then it's cool to see it when Rondale Moore is taking an 80 yard, end around, end around 80 yards. So
Also, how do you not root? I don't know what it is. Like maybe it's just a psychological thing, but something about the small guys on the field. If you remember like the Darren Sproles days and Steve Smith, something about those little guys that just go out there and ball. It is so much fun to watch. Now, I want to get into some waiver wire targets and some of that, but before we do that, let's hop real quickly. We got a couple questions in the chat, so let me pull these up real quickly. Troy, we're no stranger to this, answering questions on the fly in the chat, and we got James in the chat asking us, should I trade Antonio Brown for Debo Samuel?
Yes.
So you're saying you'd prefer Debo over Antonio Brown?
Yeah, I prefer Debo over Antonio Brown. Look, I love AB, but the problem is, and he's been getting the targets, it's just that we know Debo's the number one wide receiver on the 49ers, right? Whether it's Jimmy G, whether it's Trey Lance, he's the number one. With AB, he's getting the targets, but the problem is any given week, he could be anywhere from 1 to 3 in terms of wide receiver. So for me, give me Debo. I'm riding that wave, man. So give me Debo on this.
All right, we got one more question here before we get into the waiver wire talk. Should I trade Nick Chubb and Stefan Diggs for Derrick Henry? Assuming this is redraft, man, that's a monster trade right there. Chalk, let's get your input here, Chalk. Would you give up Nick Chubb and Stefan Diggs for Derrick Henry?
No, not redraft. No, you can't. You can't.
Yeah.
Unless you have so much depth, like a 10-team league or something, maybe. But no, you can't. If I have Henry, I would definitely do that. Otherwise,
yeah, me too.
I mean, two studs for the price of one. I don't think that obviously Derrick Henry's a little bit better than Nick Chubb, but I don't think you have to give up Stefan Diggs to get that upgrade. I mean, maybe like Nick Chubb and throw in Allen Robinson or an underperforming wide receiver to try to get that done. Throwing in Nick Chubb and Stefan Diggs is just a little too rich for my blood.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go ahead and talk through some waiver wire priorities. And, we already talked about Kadarius Toney. I think that everybody's going to be going nuts over Kadarius Toney. And then obviously there's some of the guys that are obvious, like, Devontae Booker and Darrell Williams and guys that are going to be stepping up as running backs for their injured primary running backs. But, Chuck, who's a guy right now that you are targeting on the waiver wire heading into tomorrow?
So you mentioned, Devontae Booker, Darrell Williams. I like him in Kansas City, obviously, right, with Clyde Edwards-Helaire injured. I mean, I like him. I think he's sneaky. I mentioned Khalil Herbert in Chicago as a potential. I know you're a Bears fan, Dave, so I'm curious to kind of hear your thoughts on that. I don't see him as like a long-term solution or anything like that, but especially in standard leagues, if you're really desperate for a running back, just for like maybe for the bye week or something like that, could be something kind of sneaky. I do like him there.
It was pretty close to a 50-50 split. People were expecting Damian Williams to just get all the run, but Khalil Herbert got some work and looked really, really good last week.
Yep. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown out in Detroit. Cephas just went to IR. Before Cephas went to IR, I still liked St. Brown. But now, obviously, with that, he's going to be hard to acquire off the waiver wire tonight. Tight end, though, this is one for everybody out there. Go get Dan Arnold. I love Dan Arnold, right? Like
led the team in targets last week.
Right?
First week on the team. Like first
and he's
full week
he's that type that we like, right? He's the wide receiver turned tight end, right? So you got the converted factor, mismatches, and athletic. We saw what he could do in Arizona with Kyler. We thought it was a Kyler thing, but and then he kind of had a couple of plays in Carolina with with Sam Darnold, and then and then now he's with Lawrence. Like you said, led the team in targets. Lawrence is a rookie. They're gonna just play conservative. They're gonna check down to him. So I like Dan Arnold. So he's sneaky. You could probably get him on the low, hopefully tonight.
I like it. Troy, who are some guys that you're targeting on the waiver wire this week? Anybody that Chalk didn't cover here?
Yeah, I'll say Ricky Seals-Jones, from Washington. Yep. I think because Logan Thomas, I think he's on IR. Yeah, he's on IR. So him. If you're in deeper leagues, Jerick McKinnon, I think he's a little washed, but we'll see. He might be, I don't know how he's going to be used, but maybe he might be the pass catcher again. This is for deeper leagues only. Brandon Bolden. So I don't know how banged up Damian Harris is, but I know that Ramondre Stevenson. So between those two, I believe that, Bolden, he's kind of the reliable vet. And, he's been playing even with, he's been getting work this whole time. Ramondre Stevenson, he's been a healthy scratch sometimes. So that's somebody in the deeper league. Besides that, you guys already named all the main guys, and just look to see. I don't think you're gonna find I don't think anyone else that I don't think there's anyone else. I think those are like the main guys in terms of deeper leagues I would recommend.
I'll throw out one more guy. And Twitter was having, just a conniption fit yesterday that this guy was getting some looks, but Marlon Mack looked good yesterday.
Yeah.
Like he was still juiced up. And if they're trying to trade him right now, the Giants could be in play for him. The Kansas City Chiefs could be in play for him. So Marlon Mack's a guy, if you're in a deeper league, you could probably pick him up tonight for, $2 or $3. You don't have to spend a whole lot of fab on Marlon Mack, but imagine Marlon Mack getting plugged into that Kansas City offense. I mean, it could be a lot of fun. So if you're in a deeper league, I think you go out and make an offer for Marlon Mack tonight and try to get him on your roster too.
Yeah.
Look, I don't hate that. I don't hate that at all.
Yeah. Let me ask you one more question. We already talked about the Ravens game, but are we finally giving it up on Tyson Williams? I mean, I thought that this guy was the most talented back of the bunch, but Harbaugh seems committed to getting Latavius Murray the rock. So is it time to just cut Tyson Williams and move on? Chalk, I saw you nodding your head. What do you got to add to this?
It's funny because I think you hacked my sleeper account because literally right before this show, I was literally sending out offers for Marlon Mack. Right. I mean, this is a dynasty league, right? I was sending offers for Marlon Mack, just throwing out like third, right? Like 2 4s, just trying to get what I can. Yeah. But then one of my redraft leagues, which is like pretty competitive, I literally put a waiver claim in, dropped Tyson Williams for Marlon Mack. And I spent a couple dollars. And it literally just did that before we got on here.
I'm about to do some of that too after the show.
Yeah, and I think it's a solid move. And I mean, that's what you're looking for on the bench is upside. And I don't think that Tyson Williams has the upside anymore. Devonta Freeman and Latavius Murray have clearly won the faith and respect of John Harbaugh. So I don't think that there's any opportunity where Tyson Williams comes in there and carves out a big role for himself. And Marlon Mack, he might just continue being Marlon Mack, the RB3 on the Colts, but the upside, if he gets traded to a team like the Chiefs, is immense. So yeah, I'd go out and, I'd rather have Marlon Mack sitting on my bench than a 4th or a 5th wide receiver that probably will never see my starting lineup. All right. One of the last things I want to talk about are some surprises this year. I'll start with my biggest surprise, which, I expected Mike Williams to finally, I've been beating the drum for Mike Williams. It seems like every offseason since this guy came into the league, and I expected him to have a good season, especially year 2 under Herbert, him getting to spread the ball out a little more, but I did not expect Mike Williams to be sitting as the wide receiver 2 right now. Overall, he has just blown my mind, been the biggest surprise for me of the year. Chalk, who's the guy so far that has really surprised you through these first 5 weeks?
That's a good question. You know what? I don't know if it should come as a big surprise, but I mean, I think kind of going off of Mike Williams is Justin Herbert. I actually expect him to have a sophomore slump. Like, I thought he was going to be okay, but I did expect him to struggle. And he's not struggling at all. He's the real deal. It continues to make it exciting, and continues to prove me wrong. But I'm happy to see that. So that's one person off the top of my head. That surprises me.
I'm with you, man. Justin Herbert has blown my mind this year. We also want to go over the biggest disappointments for the year before we sign off. But before we get to that, Troy, who has been your biggest surprise so far this year?
I'm going to go kind of left field. Emmanuel Sanders. Emmanuel Sanders has been very surprising. He's beating Diggs. He's higher ranked than Diggs, and nobody in the world expected that. I wish I could go back and draft him in more leagues late, because he was going, fairly late, and then he just seems to be one of the favorite targets of Josh Allen, and you want pieces of that passing offense. And it's just, again, when he came there, I thought, I'm a Gabe Davis truth there. I thought he would still be the guy, and clearly he's phased out. And, Beasley, I thought he would still be, something. And Emmanuel Sanders has pretty much ruined both Gabe Davis and Cole Beasley. So really, you only want – and Dawson Knox is a thing now too. But, Emmanuel Sanders, I just did not think he would be anything but like a depth piece, but he's really impressed me.
Yeah, I want to give props to Matt Waldman. Matt Waldman called that. He talked about, how great of a match Emmanuel Sanders and Josh Allen were going to be. And I was like, what are you talking about, man? This 30-something-year-old receiver isn't going to come in and start balling out. And that's exactly what he's doing. So props to Matt for that call. But before we sign off here, I want to get y'all's biggest disappointment so far of the year. I mean, for me, I'm going to take the chalk one. I don't really care. I got the Bears helmet behind me, and I'm going to call it out. My boy Allen Robinson. I wrote an article about this guy just perennially being a wide receiver one and saying, don't be worried about the QB situation. It doesn't matter. All this guy does is perform. He's going to see 150 targets. He's going to get 1,000 yards. He's going to see some touchdowns. But boy, did I miss on that one. That has been a huge disappointment. Troy, who is your biggest disappointment so far?
Miles Sanders has been complete. He's been trash.
Terrible.
It's like it's just he's unbelievable. I'm like, yo, with Jalen Hurts, like even if he didn't get a lot of targets, I thought he would at least be more of an efficient runner. He would get the volume, touchdown opportunities. We ain't seen none of that. I'm just like, are you kidding me? What the places I drafted him, I'm like, okay, people are undervaluing him. Nope, clearly they do something I didn't. I don't have him in a lot of places, but I have him on 2 dynasty leagues. I just look at him in disgust. Like, I have to play you,
good one.
but I have to play you, but I don't want to play you. So yeah, he's been extremely disappointing.
That's a good one. Chalk, who you got? Who's been your biggest disappointment?
Yeah, there's another one is Brandon Ayuk. I mean, I feel both of your pain, but Brandon Ayuk, Matt Harmon, you sold me on Brandon Ayuk. You got me so hyped up on it, on him through his reception perception, his profile, his numbers, like just watching the film and kind of breaking it down, listening to other smart people. I was like, okay, I'm all in, right? This is gonna be the year. And such a disappointment. I haven't given up. I'm not going to cut bait, but pretty bummed out. But yeah, Miles Sanders, I feel that. Allen Robinson, I do feel that as well. Both of those guys on a bunch of my team, my fantasy team. So feeling the pain, guys.
Now, Chuck, I was very firmly in the Debo over Brandon Ayuk camp this offseason, and I'm pretty happy about that. But what I will say, when I was diving deep into these numbers because I wanted to know what was going on in San Francisco, and one thing that I saw is that Brandon Ayuk, his best games come when George Kittle didn't play. It wasn't so much that Ayuk and Debo were cannibalizing each other. It was Ayuk and Kittle were fighting for targets. And when Kittle wasn't there, that's when Ayuk had his best game. So now with Kittle on IR, there might be an opportunity to buy low on Brandon Ayuk and see him pop over the next few weeks. So I wouldn't completely throw in the towel on Ayuk just yet. But I want to thank both of you guys for this. This was a ton of fun. Like I said, this was long overdue. I'm glad that we were finally able to connect. Before we sign off, Chalk, let everyone know what they should expect over at the Undroppables, what you guys are pumping out over there, and just, the floor is yours right now to tell everyone what's going on over at UD.
Thanks, man. So, continue to work on our rankings, redraft, offensive line, Devy, Dynasty, all of that stuff. So the rankings are up there. Got the weekly content in terms of your waiver wires, all that good stuff. Your flex plays, and who to drop from your teams. And we do have some weekly Devy college / Devy coverage. Check us out there on our undroppables.com website. Got some exciting things we're brewing up. On TikTok, Ashley's doing a great job, doing some fun stuff on TikTok, and just continue to support us. We appreciate it, and hopefully we can collaborate with you guys more often. So hopefully that's in the cards as well.
Absolutely. Troy, go ahead and let everyone know where they can find you on Twitter, what you got going on with Yahoo, Football Guys, and everybody else, and then we will sign off here.
Of course, no doubt. So y'all check me out on at King Mode on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Trying to be more active on those. You can also find my work at Yahoo Fantasy, weekly articles on Tuesdays, as well as I contribute to the bold prediction article, as well as you can find my work on Football Guys. You can find Dave and I tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Football Guys Mailbag Show. So you'll be seeing our faces again, and again, appreciate everybody supporting us. And Chuck, we'll definitely collab more in the future.
Absolutely. And if you're watching this, you know where to find me. I'm live almost every single day. I got articles coming out all over the place. Just follow me on Twitter and you'll see what I'm up to. Thanks a lot for tuning in. I will catch y'all tomorrow on the Football Guys Show. I'll catch you Thursday on the Launchpad, and then on Friday as well, doing a few guest spots. So take it easy, and I will see you guys soon.